Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today I'm using my Simon Hurley Create stamping foam along with the new Spellbinders Glimmer Hot Foil Plates that we just released. I'm so excited to see what kind of results we get, so let's get into it. Alright, I'm starting off with the retro ornament set and you get a Glimmer Hot Foil Plate and the die to cut it out. I'm just obsessed with the retro looking designs of these. To ensure even pressure with the stamping foam, I like to go in using a little bit of mint tape and I'm going to adhere it to an acrylic block. A low tack tape like mint tape works really well because it won't rip the stamping foam. I'll place that onto my Simon Hurley acrylic block, and the great part about this is that it gives it a nice solid surface so you can get even pressure all the way across. I'm gonna then go in with my heat tool and heat this for about 10 to 15 seconds, making sure to keep the heat tool moving so that it evenly heats the whole surface. Then I'm going to flip it and really quickly press this right into the design. I stamped this a little bit crooked, so all you need to do is just reheat it. It's going to go right back to flat, which is something that I love about the stamping foam, so if you make a mistake, or if you want to turn it into a different stamp, all you need to do is reheat it. And once that's good and hot, I'm going to press this right into the design. There we have our impression. I love how this looks, and there's more solid area in hot foil plates, unlike dies, so this is gonna give kind of a deeper impression. All right, then I'm gonna go in with my ink pads and start applying some ink onto the surface. If you've seen me do this before, you know that I like to apply the ink in a swiping motion. I find that tapping doesn't really give you enough ink, and you'll see that it makes some marks, whereas swiping the ink on the surface gives you lots of ink right down, and it's really easy to blend into the next color. And you can see since the hot foil plate stamps so deep into there, you really don't get any ink down into that surface if you just press lightly. And I'm gonna finish it off up top with a little bit of no diving. All right, now you can go in with a blending tool if you want to kind of help blend in between these colors and make sure they have a really smooth transition. Then I'm going to mist this down with just a couple of sprays of water. You don't want any globs of water, just a nice fine mist to help it transfer the ink. All right, then I'll line this up and stamp it down right onto our stark white cardstock. And there we have our impression. Oh my gosh, I love how this looks. It really captured all of the details of those ornaments, but the really cool part is you can stamp it now instead of just using it for foil. Now with my Simon Hurley Create inks, I just need to spray this down with some water, and then I can go in and really easily wipe it off of the surface. It comes off super easily and doesn't stain, but if you're using an ink that might stain, some stamp cleaner will help. To cut out this background, I like to bring it in my guillotine paper trimmer, and I'll just line it up with the guide edge of this plastic, and then chop it down, and that's gonna give a nice border. And you can do this all around, and you don't need to line it up with the edge up here. Just line it with this edge, and then you'll get a straight cut every time. For my background, I'm gonna use the Plaid Maker stamp. I love this one. It's got a bunch of strips of plaid, and you can peel all of these apart separately if you want to build your own pattern. But you can also use this as one whole background stamp like this. To stamp this down, I'm using a little bit of Midnight Snack for kind of a tone-on-tone blue look, and I'll ink up the whole background stamp. Once that's all inked up, I'm gonna go in on my background stamp, place down my cardstock, and I like to just take a little pressure tool and go all the way around. You can use your fingers too, just to make sure the whole background stamp transfers. And when we lift that off, check out that beautiful striped pattern that we get. I love how each stripe has a different kind of texture going with it. I think it's super cool. I'm going back in with my Midnight Snack ink, and I'm going to, again, just ink up this whole background stamp. And then I'm going to flip it upright like this. We can then flip this right down onto the card and stamp it down. And then again, give good pressure all the way across the surface to make sure that everything is going to transfer nicely. And when we lift that off, you get that really beautiful plaid pattern. Like I said, you could pull it apart and make your own pattern, but I love that you can just keep it as one background and still get this amazing effect. I popped this up on foam tape, and then I'll add it right down onto the center. I used the Joyful Christmas Sentiments Glimmer Foil Plate and the matching die. This is great because it does all of them at once, so it's a huge time saver, and I've already got a few pre-foiled in red that I'm going to use on today's card. Then I'm going to use the foiled Joy to the World sentiment, and I'm just going to add it right down to the card in an open area on some foam tape. And I love that the red foiling lands on that red stripe. Here's a look at that finished card. I love how it turned out with the retro ornament stamping, and then going in using the Plaid Maker background stamp to create that gorgeous tone-on-tone plaid background. Now we're gonna try a fun trick and see if it works. Here I'm gonna use the ornament string set, which comes with this glimmer string of ornaments and then the die to cut it out. I'm using a piece of the circle cut stamping foam so we can get some shaped stamping. Then I'm gonna once again heat this for about 10 to 15 seconds, keeping the heat tool moving so that it heats evenly. All right, once that's good and hot, we're going to stamp it down, lift it, and then stamp it in another area. It's not a super precise method, but I love that we're able to get 2 of those strings of ornaments onto one stamp. With this one, I'm gonna add light red all over using a little bit of bee sting, and again, just keeping that light pressure to make sure that the designs that are impressed stay nice and light. And this time I'm just using a darker color, so here I'm going in using some Game Over, and I'm just going to bring this in on the edge. And I love doing this just to add some depth and dimension around the edges, and it's a different way of adding some color in. Once again, I'll go in and mist this down, and then we can stamp it onto the surface using a little bit of pressure to make sure that everything transfers. And there we have our background. This one turned out so beautiful. I love the shading around the edge and that we were able to get both strings on there. I'm loving this design, so I'm gonna leave this and not reheat it because you can keep these designs in your foam and keep reusing this over and over. I wanna add this onto a card, so I'm gonna go in and just simply fussy cut around the circle design. It's really easy to do. To just go in here with my scissors and cut right around this. I want something really simple for this background, so I'm using the Candy Stripes Coverplate. What I love about this one is you can either use just the inside to cut it out, or you can use the border to cut out an A2 size panel along with the background. Since I'm already using an A2 size card, I just need the inside piece. I'm going to line it up and then place some pieces of mint tape to hold it down. I've added some liquid adhesive, and then I can line this background up. I'm gonna start in the top corner and then go down to the edges, and it should line up all the way across. I'm going to use a paper towel to kind of press this down, and that way any of the excess liquid adhesive will go into the paper towel instead of all over my project. I love how simple that striped background is with the tone-on-tone on white cardstock, and you could really use this all year round. Then I'm gonna add this right down underneath the focal point, and there is that finished card. I love this focal point and how we were able to double stamp it using the ornament string, and then going in and making that background with the candy stripes is so fun. For the next card, I'm going to use the Geo Snowflakes Glimmer Cover Plate. I love the intricate design on this one. For this, I'm going to use a piece of large rectangle stamping foam, and I'm going to heat this up again for 10 to 15 seconds. I'm going to really focus it on the bottom half though, because I'm only going to use half of this background. All right, and once that's ready, I'm going to place this down and give it some good pressure. And again, I really focus my energy down at the bottom half because that's what I'm gonna be using for today's card. Here, I'm gonna add down a little bit of Latergator on the background, again, using this swiping motion and only a little bit of pressure. This wasn't really indented, but it still has that pattern. So don't worry if it doesn't look super impressed, it still transfers. And then I'll bring in some fake plant to add lots of shading down on the bottom half. I'll mist down this background, and then I'll line it up at the bottom, and it should be lined up, and then I can press this all down to make sure that it transfers nicely. And when we lift that off and check that out, I love how it transferred. You get that really beautiful geometric snowflake design in there. To really intensify the shading at the bottom, I'm gonna go in with my blending tool and a little bit of that same fake plant color, and just go in and shade some of this down here. To add some interest to backgrounds, I like to cut them on a diagonal sometimes. So I'm gonna go in here with this background and just cut it right down, and this is going to add a little bit more interest. And I'll add this down at the bottom, starting in one of the corners, going up the edge, and then it should line it up really nicely. For the focal point, I'm going to use the Floral Stag die set. And the really cool part about this die set is, of course, there is that larger deer, but there's also a bunch of different flowers that you can use individually to make a really nice sophisticated card. All right, starting off with the poinsettia, and everything for one flower is kind of grouped together like this so that it all cuts out at once. So I'll place this down, and then we'll run that right through our die cutting machine. And then I'll cut the greens out of 2 different shades of green cardstock. Now I love how these die cuts look, but they're kind of one-dimensional. So to step it up, I like to go in with kind of a similar color that's a little bit darker. Here I'm using some Game Over, and I'm just going to add it to the edges of these petals. This just makes it kind of 3D and really brings it to life. You can already tell a difference. All right, and then same thing with the leaves. I'll just bring ink in on one of the sides here, just to add some dimension. Don't be afraid of a little ink, because you can really see how that brings some life to these. It's super easy to put this together. I'm gonna grab just a little bit of liquid adhesive, put it right in the center there, just one little dot, and then all you need to do is rotate the top piece so that the petals are kind of in between the bottom ones, and then place that right down. There's also this little centerpiece which you can place down right into the center. You could skip this step if you want, but there's also like 4 little tiny berries which you can add right to the center. I like to add a gold center to these, so I'll go in using a little bit of lunar paste in the color Slippery and Wet, and I'll just take the tiniest little bit out of the lid on a paintbrush and just dab that right onto the center. This adds just that touch of gold shimmer and mica, and once it's dry, it won't come off on your finger. but it keeps all of that amazing texture and detail as well. I've positioned the poinsettias how I want them, and then I'm going to use the Halftone Holiday set to find a sentiment that I like. I love the font on these. Ink it up, and then I'll stamp it right down onto the card. And the VersaFine ink stays wet just long enough to throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder, and then I'll heat set that until it's clear and shiny. All right, then again, I'll go in using a little bit more liquid adhesive to adhere these right down onto the panel. I'm not that great at making little arrangements either, but I just kind of group things together. If you need to, trim down the leaves so that you can really easily tuck them underneath your poinsettias. Tuck that under there, and as I'm doing this, I'll make some pieces kind of hang off the edge to add a little bit more dimension. All right, then I'll line this up and place it down on some foam tape right in the center. And that finishes off this card. I love that focal point with the poinsettias and how we were able to stamp down the background using the Snowflakes Glimmer plate, which usually would never be able to stamp like this. All right, you guys, I hope you really enjoyed those techniques. Be sure to leave me a comment down below on which card was your favorite. I always love to chat with you guys down there. And down below is a full supplies list to everything that I used, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!